Hello, my name is Matthew Hunter with Legacy Wilderness Academy, and in this video I'm going to show you a highly effective lung formula for working with COVID-19 and other respiratory viruses. This video is inspired by Daryl Patton, aka the Southern Herbalist, who reports using this formula during the COVID outbreak for helping to reduce lung fibrosis, one of the most damaging symptoms associated with the COVID virus. This formula contains 3 different herbs and is best prepared and administered in a nebulizer. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to identify each of those 3 herbs in the field. We'll talk about their individual medicinal uses, then we'll take them back to the kitchen, and I'll show you how to administer them in a nebulizer right from home. Stay tuned. Before we get started, I'll quickly mention that if you want to learn more about medicinal plants of the southeastern U.S., make sure that after this video you download my free guide to medicinal plants, which you can find in the link in the description below this video. The first plant we're going to be looking at today is called Boneset or Eupatorium perfoliatum. This plant can be recognized by its white flowers, which appear in the late summer. It is very distinct when you get up close because you can see that the leaves are arranged oppositely, and they are what's known as perfoliate, which means the bases of the leaves connect, giving it the appearance that the stem is just sort of poking right through. This perfoliate leaf pattern is very distinct for boneset. Not a whole lot of plants have this pattern, so it's an excellent aid to identification. So the parts we're using for boneset are the leaves and the flowering tops. Boneset is one of the most important respiratory antivirals in Western herbalism. It's a powerful plant that directly inhibits viral replication. And in this formula, we're using it to help reduce the fibrosis in the lungs, which is, again, one of the most damaging symptoms of COVID that's responsible for a lot of the deaths, right? So let's talk about this fibrosis in the lungs. So if we look at our respiratory tract, as we breathe in, air is going to go down our trachea, then it's going to split off into the bronchi. And then those bronchi split off further into bronchioles, which eventually end in these tiny little air sacs called alveoli. And so this lung fibrosis is an inflammation, scarring, and stiffening of the alveoli. These tiny little air sacs that need to open and close to facilitate air exchange are becoming inflamed and stiffened, and then they're filling up with moisture. And so that's why, you'll have that, even after COVID is over, you'll have that shortness of breath for a long time. That's that scarring of the lung tissue. But during COVID, it's heavily inflamed, it's stiff, and then you end up drowning on your own fluid. You just can't get enough oxygen. So this is one of the plants in the formula that's going to help reduce that inflammation and help reduce that stiffness of the alveoli, enabling the person to breathe better. The next plant in our formula is rabbit tobacco, or life everlasting, Pseudonephalium obtusifolium. This plant flowers around the same time as boneset in the late summer or early fall. You can see what the flowers look like here. This plant can grow taller than knee high, but in my area it usually gets about knee high is kind of the average height. And one of the ways it's identified is by the leaves, which have a white underside. It also has like a woolly texture to it. And as the plant dies, the leaves on the bottom of the stem will start to dry up, and they have this nice white color with a brown surface. And that's why this plant is called life everlasting, because even after it dies, it still has that nice pop of color. And for this plant, the part we're actually after is these dead leaves that have naturally dried on the stalk. It's pretty obvious whenever you harvest the green leaves and dry them versus take these leaves that have naturally dried on the plant. The smell is a lot stronger, indicating that they're higher in these medicinal terpenes that we're after. So it's kind of unique in the plant world in that we actually want to get the dead leaves of the plant rather than the green leaves. So let's talk about the medicinal uses of rabbit tobacco. Rabbit tobacco is another powerful respiratory antiviral, which is due to its high terpene content. It's also an astringent. So as an astringent, it works on the lungs to tighten those tissues, and essentially it helps if the lungs are just filling up with fluid and you want to be able to sort of dry them out, so to speak. It tightens those tissues and makes it to where water can't enter into the lungs as easily. It's also an expectorant, which means if there's a bunch of phlegm that's stuck in the lungs, it can help expel that. And then it's also a sedative for the lungs, or a nervine for the lungs. So it's going to take out a lot of the pain in the lungs during these respiratory infections. So this is, again, one that's helping expel phlegm, helping sort of dry up the lungs, so to speak, and reducing pain, as well as working on the root cause, the virus itself. The third and final plant in our formula is called mullein or Verbascum thapsus. Generally speaking, mullein has a 2-year life cycle. In its first year, it puts out a rosette coming directly out of the ground, as you see here. It's identified by its fuzzy leaves that have sort of a yellowish tint to them, so sort of a yellow-green color. In its second year, it puts up a vertical stalk that can get as tall as about 6 feet. And you can see what it looks like. It's already went to seed here, but it has yellow flowers. And then when it goes to seed, it has a sort of hot dog on a stick appearance, kind of like a cattail, at least from a distance. And so that's the general shape of mullein, a very easy plant to identify. So let's talk about the medicinal uses of mullein. Then we'll head back to the kitchen and I'll show you how to combine all 3 of these herbs into a nebulizer formula. So mullein is pretty simple and straightforward. It's widely known in Western herbalism as a respiratory tract decongestant and anti-inflammatory. Anyone who has drank mullein when they have a stuffy nose or a cold can tell you how effective it is at just sort of soothing the membranes in the respiratory tract, reducing that inflammation and helping you breathe better. It's also an expectorant that can help expel mucus from the lungs. So in a nebulizer, when we're applying it directly to the lungs, it's going to have all of those effects even more powerful, suited directly to the tissue that we're applying it to in the lungs. So it's a great addition to any respiratory formula. All right, so here we have our 3 plants, and these are the dried leaves. So if you harvest your plants fresh like I do, you'll want to dry them on the counter. And of course, the rabbit tobacco is already dried because we harvested the dried leaves. The mullein, on the other hand, it tends to not want to dry as well as most plants because it's covered in hairs, and it also has a thick midrib. So for the mullein, you can put it in a food dehydrator, or you can put it on a baking sheet in the oven, turn the oven on the lowest setting, and prop the door open and leave it in there for 1 to 2 hours just to facilitate drying and make sure that that center midrib on the leaf doesn't mold. And so now we want to make a decoction. We want to have 1 cup of the tea or decoction when we're finished here. And so to make a quote unquote correct decoction, we could use 7 grams of herbs to about a cup of water. Of course, with these 3 herbs, they're all very safe, so I'm not going to use exact amounts. I'm going to do about a half of each of the piles. And then here I have 2 cups of water in this pot. And I want to the end result to be 1 cup of water. So I'm assuming the mullein's going to soak a lot of that water up, and then some of it's going to evaporate when it's simmering. But I'm going to simmer it for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have 1 cup of decoction. All right, so here we have our finished decoction, and we have exactly 1 cup. And I should mention that this should be either distilled water or, in my case, reverse osmosis filtered water, because it is going to be going into our lungs, so we want to make sure it's clean water. And the next step is to turn this into what we call an isotonic solution. Just like when you get an IV, how it's not just water, but it's saline water. We want to have saline water going into our lungs, and that's because the cells in our body are about 0.9% salt. And if we just put water in there that doesn't have any salt in it, then it's going to be hypotonic. And what's going to end up happening is the cells in our lungs are going to swell up a little bit, and it's going to give us potentially like a stuffy feeling, and it's not going to be, we're really going to be the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're trying to reduce inflammation, not cause stuffiness. And so to do that, we're just going to be adding a little bit of salt. So this is neti salt, which is used for neti pots. It's basically just a purified salt. It's non-iodized, doesn't have any of those anti-caking agents. And depending on what source you choose online, which source you read, it's going to be anywhere from about a 1/4 teaspoon to a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And again, it depends on the type of salt you're using. I've done the math, and it seems that even though most sources say a 1/2 teaspoon, I think a 1/4 teaspoon is actually going to give us an isotonic solution. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit more, if it's a little bit hypertonic, that's not a big deal. So we're going to be doing 1/4 teaspoon to 1 cup of our decoction. Okay, so a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and we'll go ahead and stir that up. So now that we have our nebulizer solution, the rest is simple. All we're going to do is hook up our nebulizer, And then we're just going to pour the solution into the nebulizer cup, just like this. And, we'll do about 4 cc's. Okay? This can be done multiple times a day, 3 to 5 times a day. And, when it comes to COVID, I know at least for me, when I get COVID, I've got it, I think, twice now. The very first thing that happens is I start to feel a little bit sick. And then the way I know it's COVID is I start to lose my taste. And so that's happened, I think, both times. And so that's whenever you would want to start just really, slamming this stuff down every day. That's not medical advice, but, that's what I would do. And so we will go ahead and turn it on. And you can proceed with your nebulizer administration that way. Now, you may be asking, well, what if I have tinctures, I don't have the whole herb? You can use tinctures in a nebulizer as well. Even though it's alcohol, as long as you don't put too much, it's going to be fine. You can also use glycerites as well. Okay, so let's say all you had was tinctures and you took all your herbs in the formula and you put them together in a tincture. Well, how would that work? You would still make your isotonic solution. You just would make it with water instead of, you wouldn't make a decoction, you just do water. And then you would pour it in, and then you can take your droppers, your tincture, this is some pleurisy root or butterfly weed that I covered in a previous video, and you can squirt some of that in there. Okay? Now, if you put a little bit too much, it's not gonna, get you drunk or anything like that. It's just gonna burn, you'll just feel it burning instantly. It's not the end of the world. And then what you would do is you just pour it out and add a little bit less. So that's probably, enough right there. Go ahead and turn it back on. I can definitely taste that pleurisy root, but no burning. So I put enough in there, but not too much. And so I'm trying to think if there's maybe one more thing I want to say. Oh, I know what it was. So you don't want to actually take a super deep breath every single breath because you don't want to hyperventilate. So just take normal breaths when you're doing this, and then on every 4th or 5th or 6th breath, you can take a nice deep breath. And so that is how to administer herbs in a nebulizer right from home. Something that I think every person should know how to do, have on hand. Administering herbs in a nebulizer like this not only gets the herbs directly to the affected tissue, which is going to make them more effective, but it also makes them absorb into the bloodstream a lot more effectively than like a tea, for example, where your stomach acids are going to be breaking down some of those constituents. So you can use herbs in a nebulizer even if they're not directly for the lungs. For example, if you wanted to affect the nervous system and you wanted to get those herbs into the bloodstream, you could use nervous system herbs in a nebulizer even if you're not trying to affect the lungs in any way. And so knowing how to use a nebulizer is the bread and butter of herbal medicine and working with, viral outbreaks in your neighborhood, your church, or your community. So that's how to do it. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, my name is Matthew Hunter with Legacy Wilderness Academy, and I hope my videos are helping you and your family stay well during flu season. Again, if you want to learn more about medicinal plants of the Southeast, make sure you download my guide to medicinal plants in the link in the description below this video. And I'm going to go ahead and put a couple more videos up on the screen that are herbs for cold and flu specifically. So I hope you've enjoyed the channel. See you next time. All right, guys, I'm finished. Y'all can come out now.